Hey folks, Ariel over here. Tonight I'm just doing a quick dinner with leftovers. What I've got here is a bunch of beef roast. This was a chuck roast. This is part of the half a steer that we had purchased from some neighbors back in the fall. I really like roast, and in my experience, some parts of a chuck roast are really juicy and delicious, and then after we have a couple meals out of that, there are some parts that are just a little bit more of a drier texture. It's just the nature of the cut of meat. I find that an excellent way to use those up is to make something like barbecue beef, pulled beef. So what I'm doing here with the leftovers I've got, the grain of the meat kind of goes different directions in a cut of chuck, but if, say, in this chunk, if the grain is going this way, I'm going to cut across that so I have a bunch of short little pieces. As I simmer this, this will kind of pull apart into the texture of like pulled pork kind of thing is what I'm going for. This is something we commonly do with leftover roast. And then we're going to have this sandwiches for dinner with some, got a loaf of bread over there that I'd baked a little while ago actually, and it was in the freezer. I try to make, you know, extra rolls, extra bread when I do it so that then I can pull it for making quick meals like this. So anyway, this might give you some ideas if you ever have leftover things. I love having leftovers because they make all kinds of wonderful meals. I know sometimes people say, well, what do you do with leftover things? Well, this is one of them. So the way this worked is, you know, we had a beef roast. I believe we had that for dinner one night when I had my brother over, so it fed 3 people that evening. And then Clay and I had leftovers of it for another dinner, and now this is probably going to make 2 meals worth of, you know, like pulled beef sandwiches. So we're going to get a good many meals out of the, you know, one time heating up the oven, filling and washing, you know, the roast pan, all that stuff, which is kind of the way I like to cook, because even though I love cooking, I like to have some days where stuff is a little easier because I have a lot of other projects to do as well. You could do this with many different leftover meats. If you got some chicken, you can shred it up. If you've got some pork, you can do that. So this same kind of thing would work with a lot of things. But this will give you an idea what I'm doing. So basically I'm making short chunks, and even though that looks like it's still a big chunk, as that warms up, it's going to kind of pull apart into little shreds. This meat is cold right now because it came out of the refrigerator. And it's a cold evening outside. Not super cold, but it's been snowing lately all day, and it's definitely still very wintry here. So this is good hearty food for a cold day. Now, the fastest way to do this would be to just dump a bottle of barbecue sauce from a grocery store onto it, or a bottle off of your shelf if you've made your own. Got some fat and sinewy trimmings left in there. But I'm actually gonna make a quick barbecue sauce. So to get this simmering down, I'm gonna put just a teeny bit of water in the bottom of the pan and put a lid on it. That's gonna create some steam. I'm gonna put it on low, and we're gonna get that, you know, kind of starting to soften up and shred. And while that is warming through, I'm going to make some barbecue sauce. Reasons you might make your own are it's often less expensive, and because I happen to have a bottle here of the standard grocery store sauce that I got, because sometimes when I clean people's houses I get clean outs of food that get left behind, and I try not to let things go to waste. So anyway, I have some of this, not what I would normally buy. But for example, the ingredients list on this, the first thing is high fructose corn syrup, then distilled vinegar, tomato paste, honey, modified cornstarch, salt, caramel color, natural flavor, which is usually not natural anything, pineapple juice concentrate, spice, sodium benzoate, natural smoke flavor, molasses, garlic, corn syrup, sugar, mustard flour, tamarind, celery seed. I'm going to omit quite a few of those ingredients from my sauce. Now the best way to do this would be with actual fresh tomatoes, since it is the middle of winter and both that and I can't grow fresh tomatoes. I'm actually going to start with a bottle of some ketchup. I try to buy ones that are just tomato concentrate, vinegar, real sugar, not corn syrup, salt, usually onion powder. That's what's in here. If you have real tomatoes, you can start with that and blend them up, or spaghetti sauce. So I'm just going to start with some of that since it's winter and I haven't got any tomatoes around, and that's what I'm using. Then I'm going to, you could use dry mustard or a prepared mustard. Ingredients on that should just be vinegar, water, mustard seeds, salt, sometimes some turmeric because it gives it a pretty yellow color. So again, you could just add salt and dry mustard powder. Since I have some prepared mustard, I'm going to use some of that. I like mustard flavor, so I'm going to do plenty of that. This bottle's getting nearly empty. So like many things, if you're making it yourself, you could do all kinds of things. Sometime if I get ambitious, back in the summer when I can at least buy tomatoes in bulk, I should can a bunch of my own barbecue sauce and have it ready for doing things like this. But I'm going to mix these two up. I'm going to add some vinegar. I'm using a raw apple cider vinegar instead of a distilled vinegar like was on the list of the commercial sauce. I don't want to make it too watery. I've probably done, like most things, I dump and pour till it looks and tastes right. Probably did 3/4 of a cup of ketchup and about 1/4 of a cup of mustard and maybe another 1/4 of a cup of vinegar in here. And just kind of stir that together. I think I'm going to add a little bit more vinegar because I like that flavor. And barbecue sauces are usually a little bit sweet. I'm going to use some of our raw honey here. It's starting to crystallize just a little bit because that's what raw honey does when you have it around for this, especially in a cold room. Not that our house is cold, but the pantry is. So I've got some crystals here, but they'll dissolve quite nicely. So I'm going to do a really well measured, I'm going to say about 1/4 of a cup of semi-liquid, semi-crystal honey chunks there to sweeten up our barbecue sauce. Get that dissolving into everything else here. You can uncrystallize honey by just putting the jar in a pot of warm water and letting it sit till it redissolves. But in this case where I'm just putting it into something else that is liquid, I'm letting it dissolve in here. So this is smelling pretty barbecue saucy. I'm going to take a peek at my meat there, which is just starting to steam a little bit. Now from here you can make all kinds of barbecue sauce flavors. You could certainly make a really hot spicy one by putting in some red pepper, actually grind up peppers, any kind of red pepper flakes, chili powder, cayenne pepper, any of that stuff. You could make it sweeter by putting more honey in. You could make it smokier by putting, I do have some liquid smoke actually. I'm going to add a little liquid smoke flavoring just because that's yummy. Maybe a teaspoon or so. This stuff is powerful. This is another name for this is wood vinegar. It's made from wood and it can be used very beneficially for a lot of horticultural things in the garden as well. That gives it a smoky flavor. I'm going to add a bit of Worcestershire sauce because that's the flavor I like. You could add a little soy sauce. You could skip it. You can just make things whatever taste you like. That's a couple tablespoons of that. And I think this is going to be a pretty delicious sauce to put over our shredded meat. Let's see if I need to add any salt. A barbecue sauce would often have some, but there is some already in both the ketchup and mustard and in the meat because I like to roast my roast covered in sauerkraut. The acid and salt from the sauerkraut helps tenderize the meat and keep it moist, so there's already salt in the meat as well. That seems like a pretty good barbecue flavor. So I'm going to call that good. We're going to simmer our meat here till it falls apart, pour this over it, and then we'll have a meal made of our leftovers. You can see how the meat's starting to, as it warms up, kind of crumble apart into softer shreds. So we're just going to keep going with that. If it starts to stick on the bottom, I'll add just a couple more tablespoons of water to make a little more steam to keep making it come apart. This has been simmering for 6 or 7 minutes now. And you can see what I mean about the meat just kind of crumbles up into little shreds. So we are going to pour our barbecue sauce over this. In a second I'll use a spatula and get the rest of that out. But now we're going to continue to let this simmer for just a bit, which will get that barbecue sauce flavors we made embedded all through the meat. And I'll just put the lid back on and let that steam, still in kind of a low temperature, for a little bit longer. Okay, you can see here now how we've got juicy shredded chunks of meat. That's going to go into our sandwiches for dinner, and our barbecue beef is done.
Thank you everyone for watching. It means a lot, and I hope you learned something along the way.
If you know somebody else who would enjoy this as well, share it with them.